Hello and welcome everybody to this session, which is centered around the publication of this wonderful book, Autoethnography Pedagogy and Practice. And just to give a description of what the book involves, it brings together 42 authors from our community who have written about the challenges and possibilities developing autoethnography in or about their experiences of being introduced to autoethnography and what type of guidance and relationships have been useful on this journey. And Kitrina was just telling me that that's with a particular focus in terms of the sciences and where autoethnography has emerged and been used in creative ways within places which we might not expect autoethnography to be appearing. So it is with great pleasure that I would like to introduce the various presenters today who have all contributed to this volume. And I will hand over now to Trude and Knut with their presentation on This is How the System Works, a collaborative attempt to explore the power of being systematically non-systematic in mentoring and teaching autoethnography.
Okay, so this chapter was written by Knut and myself, and with a master student of Knut's named Geir. And unfortunately, Geir is not here, but this chapter is written as a dialogue between the three of us. So we will also read Geir's voice. Yes. Okay, so Geir, a former master student, Knut and myself have been sitting together for quite a while, discussing the invitation to write a chapter on how we approach the pedagogy and practice of autoethnography. The conversation flies in all directions: digressions, detours, presence, and absence. Geir talks about goosebumps and how some of life's most evocative experiences can make your body respond instantly and pre-reflexively. Why is it that a piece of music or a poem can feel so physical and immediate? Once we start digging for meaning and truth, something is lost. Perhaps our experiences on the topic of autoethnography, pedagogy, and practice are best shared embedded in stories. And I will read Geir's voice. I had chosen a deeply personal topic and wasn't sure if I should share it. I felt shame and it bothered me. Why should I feel ashamed? So I told my master's class about growing up with a drunkenness and violence, about my father who became a roaring, terrible monster when he drank and who was violent towards my mother. I told everyone about the endless fear that my father would kill my mother. I told everyone that throughout my life, I have thought a lot about how to forgive my father, but I'd come to the conclusion that if forgiveness was not possible, it was important for me to come to terms with my past. Working in mental health care, I saw many people with similar problems. They struggle with moving on, to forgive, find closure, and to let go. I shared how this could be an interesting topic for my master thesis. Quietness. And then people responded. Most praised my openness. Knut peered at me over his glasses and said, "Have you ever thought about writing an autoethnography?"
Little did I know at the time that I would end up being his supervisor. The imposter syndrome is a big part of me being an academic, but in this case, the feeling of falling short was well-founded. I threw myself over Ellis's book, The Ethnographic Eye, without getting the soothing effect I was seeking. One place she writes, "I'm always amazed at how much mentoring these autoethnographic projects demand. I have to be a parent and a counselor as well as an academic advisor." I wasn't signing up for that. I don't think Geir was either. In another co-written book chapter, Trude and I have been inspired by Frank Zappa's character, the central scrutinizer, who's responsible for enforcing all the laws that haven't been passed. We argue that this character may also be found in academia. Earlier, I had regraded one of Geir's assignments after he appealed his result, but I wasn't impressed and ended up lowering the grade. After, we spoke on the phone, and like a true central scrutinizer, I explained why it didn't meet the mark, basically telling him, this is how the system works. I later shared with Geir how his work about reconciling with the past resonated with me. It had to do with an experience of being deceived, that things in my life of great importance were treated with silence. People I trusted and held dear, who turned out not to be who they seemed. I still held them dear and trusted them despite it all, yet I never got or grasped the opportunity to talk about these experiences with them. Not until we started discussing this chapter did I find the moment to ask about the downgrading and whether Geir had connected the dots and understood that I was involved. Turns out he had, and thought to himself that I was a big jerk.
To me, your experiences show how autoethnography is deeply relational. Striving for and finding resonance can sometimes spark off ongoing journeys that stretch beyond academic development. A story can start anywhere. As storytellers and story livers, we are continually made and remade. My story, written as part of this chapter in January 2024, goes something like this. I have been inspired by autoethnography for several years now, ever since I stumbled over it while working on my PhD thesis. My interest in subjectivity and experiential knowledge was partly shaped by my many years of working in mental health care before entering academia. While I repeatedly experienced how much every little story, especially those that didn't fit into neat boxes, mattered, I was still immersed in a system that offered such stories little nourishment. The central scrutinizer lives in mental health services and inside each one of us. He can be like a twisted version of Santa, an invisible threat, like in that well-known song about Santa Claus who is coming to town. A Santa who you better watch out for, a hidden Santa who admonishes you to behave, to not complain, and better not cry. He keeps an eye on you, whether you are sleeping or awake. The idea of some God's eye Santa keeping lists of who is naughty and nice from an unseen position is a perfect way of disciplining minds and bodies. Knut and Geir embarked on an autoethnographic expedition together, drawing the map along the way. While stepping down from the expert shelf can feel liberating, it also involves vulnerability.
A lot can happen in someone's life while completing a master's degree, and with Geir, life and his project were deeply intertwined. And as Wyatt and Talan write, supervising can be joyful, heartfelt, and at times exhausting. In our case, leading to a relationship I truly value. I struggle with the idea of mentoring or supervising in its traditional form, the idea that I am supposed to guide the way. I prefer the approach you, Trude, have introduced me to, men-transgressoring, a friendship-like collaboration on a shared journey. I had something to offer Geir, but at times it felt like the blind leading the blind. When he began sending me short texts, I was stunned. They were personal, heartfelt, and raw. I believed his text was special and didn't want to muck it up. I felt a kind of responsibility, and in addition, his text resonated with my own life, my own relationships, my own need to forgive and reconcile. I resent being told that this is how the system works. Men transgressioning with Geir gave me a chance to challenge some of the rules set by academia's central scrutinizers. Yet, I still worried about how Geir's work would be judged by others, and looked for ways to navigate institutional restrictions without silencing the stories he wanted to tell. What would the scrutinizers think? And then Geir writes, I'm happy and grateful when someone is interested in me and what I do. At the same time, there's always a voice that says, do you really think you are that good? Fortunately, though, other voices have grown. I felt like we were two equals. We distracted each other a lot. Distractions that were both interesting and educational, and we both joked that we might be leading each other astray, but I always felt wiser after each distraction, as did I. We were in it together, exploring a path none of us had taken before.
This is how the system works, was a quote from a colleague of ours, kindly reminding us how things ought to be done. But who and what is the system? Should we unquestionably abide by the rules of the scrutinizer or the system? We realize that being a student or a teacher is evidently part of a system and that there is perhaps no way around that. However, every system has its cracks, and that is where the light hopefully gets in. Being systematically unsystematic might provide such cracks. Community is key. The possibility to remain unfinalized becomes much bigger when you can struggle for it in dialogue. We're in it together. It is as simple and as complicated as that.
Lovely. Thank you, Trude and Knut. Yes, I love that image of the kind of internalized central scrutinizer and this kind of Foucauldian creepy Santa as well. Yeah. Excellent. We'll move on to our next presentation. The title is Autoethnography in Pharmacy Education and Practice.
So I will be speaking for the three of us. So read pieces, but I will introduce you so you know the context. Djenane arrives at the vegan cafe. As she stops, her long straight hair, by inertia, completes the movement. She pulls the hair back from her face as she takes a deep breath, enjoying the delicious coffee aroma. She wears a long, colorful skirt. I should have that today, but sorry. And a dark blue cropped top. Her green eyes run through the table, searching for her invitees. As she can't see them, she looks at her wristwatch and figures she is 10 minutes early. She chooses a nice table with 2 more chairs. As the smiling waiter with the blue apron approaches, she orders a special Brazilian coffee. While waiting, Djenane thinks about all the events that brought her up to this moment. Pharmaceutical care practice, qualitative research, the International Congress of Qualitative Inquiry, up to the invitation to write this chapter. The waiter brings her coffee, and she takes a sip from the fragrant, steamy cup. Looking at the door, she sees Simone arriving. Simone has her hair up, which is rare, and wears a long and beautiful reddish skirt. She looks very happy. After that, we have a long conversation about Carnival, because we are just coming from the holiday, so we talk about, dances, things like that, for like a couple of pages, which is really interesting. And then we have a picture of the three of us that day having coffee, which I love. We included. So then so we start, okay, let's record this. Let's start wondering and think about what we want to talk about in our chapter. And I say, I remember when I first saw, which I mentioned yesterday in my talk, I remember when I first saw an autoethnography performance. It was presented by Tammy Spry at the ICQI. I knew I had been transformed forever. She performed her experience of losing a newborn child in 2009. I felt the potency of the method in each cell of my body. It was a remarkably bodily experience. As I wrote in my journal that day, as I watched and listened to that woman, I experienced my body as a volcano in eruption, trembling and sensing a kind of electric shock in an explosive way. How can research do this to me? How can it do this to my body? What are the transformative possibilities of something like this? I need to explore it and bring it home. This is my journal. So Simone comes. You always have very deep experiences at the ICQI, don't you, Djenane? It's fantastic. This makes me think about a discussion that we can bring up in our text. Although I felt very touched by Bochner's text, my research interests had a more technical and scientific and pedagogical focus. Unlike many of the author's texts, like Bochner and those of Carolyn Ellis, which we were later able to explore a lot in our graduate autoethnography course, I did not intend to investigate sensitive or very intimate themes. I then undertook a search for autoethnographies in the field of health professional education and found a summary that mentioned the work of Elisa Foster, a professor who worked with medical residents using autoethnography as an instrument for more humanized training in healthcare. Foster, 2013. You had already met her at the ICQI Congress in Illinois. Remember, Djenane? And I nod, yes. So Simone continues, from then on, I began looking for references in autoethnography that would help me in the construction of my research project. On the autoethnography continuum, I found comfort in the midpoint with authors like Cheng and Leroux, I don't know how to say these names, finding myself neither at the extremes of Anderson's analytical nor at Ellis' evocative autoethnography. Perhaps because it was the first autoethnographic work in our program, which made me feel very insecure about its acceptance. Maybe because I didn't feel capable of creating an evocative text, or both. So Simone was the first one to do autoethnography. She was my PhD student. And then I say, this was 2013, right? Wow, we have grown so much as a group since then. Besides your thesis that described your experience of teaching pharmacy students how to take care of patients, remember, like Daniela developed our master's students developed an autoethnography about her transformation from a traditional pharmacist to a clinical and patient-centered pharmacist. This was a very creative piece of work that uncovered something special in our work here, the need for the pharmacist to change when he or she decides to take care of real people. By following a conversation between the old and the current self of a pharmacist, the manuscript goes through the most important change the pharmacist undergoes to be able to live as a patient care provider. Simone said, yes, that's a very nice piece of work from our group. I'm very proud of it. This study reveals how the process of doing autoethnography can lead to self-understanding and to deep personal and professional transformation. So Anna is our graduate student. So Simone was my graduate student. Simone and I now are advising Anna. And Anna said, I'm so grateful to have both of you as advisor on this doctorate path. When I did my master, Djenane, you were my co-advisor and Simone was my colleague. Now I'm yours and Simone mentee. That's crazy. It's nice to see our stories coming together, interweaving each other's. When I came back to the pharmacy school to improve my clinical practice, it was such a coincidence that you both were offering that course about autoethnography. And I say, coincidence or faith? Laughter. That course was very special to all of us. It was very special to me. It was our initial course program that initially we planned to write about our own research topics. But right after our first encounter, COVID pandemic crept up on us. In that unusual scenario, Simone and I proposed to the group that all of us would write autoethnographies about our experiences with living through the pandemic in Brazil, as we studied autoethnography theory. I guess none of us could really think about anything else at that time, nervous laughter. Anna says, those autoethnography productions were so rich, texts, poems, photographs, audio performances, and even dance. Some of those were created by pharmacists who never expressed themselves in languages other than the academic one. Our group already used unusual methods in classes, but this course broke even even further from conventional health teaching approaches. And Simone says, it was a call for change for me. Arts, culture matter, pharmacists, embodied knowledge matters, laughter. Pharmacy is not just about automatic repetition of concepts imposed from supposedly neutral and unhistorical scientific days. 1 minute, thank you. Anna said that community helped all of us to get through the pandemic and obtain some relief from the experience of confinement and isolation. Among the students, there were those who worked on the front lines fighting COVID in healthcare services and who still had to do their utmost to take care of their families. That course unexpectedly created an opportunity for connection that was so scarce at that time. Simone says, during our course, we created an unprecedented safe space in the College of Pharmacy. The intimacy between students and professors grew along with the exposure of delicate and even intimate situations. Autoethnography aided us in opening up to each other and exercise compassion. Love and joy were part of the teaching-learn process as recommended by Paulo Freire. We use Paulo Freire a lot in our group. And I'm finishing. And Anna says, yes, I remember those classes when we discussed Olson's work for example, which addressed the theme of abusive relationships. During our conversation, 2 students in abusive relationships became aware of their own domestic situations, and classmates and teachers lovingly support them on breaking free from those relationships. And then I say, wow, it was amazing. Like, I don't believe everything we went through, that as we learned autoethnography for the first time, you know, as teachers and students. It was an amazing experience. Thank you.
Thank you, yeah, lovely. And there's a wonderful sense that we get of the kind of emergence, just as in your keynote yesterday, you know, the emergence of this creative, collaborative group. And your writing, it just comes across these conversations. The next, David's going to present on creative relationships, novel responses, and falling in love.
Morning, everyone. Morning, online friends. It's, as Jamie said, Andrew unfortunately couldn't be with us. So hello, Andrew, if you're watching online or the recording. So we had planned to share a part of the chapter, which was a dialogue, but I'm going to focus on some short scenes from my own experience in my own voice. A major part of the book and purpose of the book is to try to get into how we learn autoethnography, how we teach autoethnography, how we advise or supervise others in autoethnography. And I sort of, reflecting on that in my own experience, realized that there were moments in my life that had been significant. I didn't realize it at the time, because I most of the time didn't know what autoethnography was when these were happening. But when I've looked back, I've seen that they've been significant in my own development as an autoethnographer and as a supervisor and teacher of autoethnography. So I'd like to share some of those moments with you. I'm 11 years old, my first ever French lesson. The teacher explodes into the classroom, salt and pepper beard, spittle from his mouth, fiery eyes, shouting unintelligibly. In an instant, I'm frozen in fear. I do not at this time understand that the noises he is making are French words. I do not yet know that he will continue this approach to teaching the language, speaking the same French words, only louder and more angrily, every time I fail to understand. Throughout each and every lesson, I do not yet understand that he is in the process of re-traumatizing me. I felt it then for a moment. Moving on. I am 14 years old. We are required to join the combined cadet force at school, Army, Navy, or Air Force. I choose Army. Drill practice dominates our afternoons. The corporal, the boy in the year above, shouts a lot, as loud as he can. Everyone obeys. Right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, on and on and on and on and on. I can't stand it. I can't stand being shouted at. I can't stand the conformity. I can't stand someone trying to control me. And I can't stand the boredom. I leave the Army cadets after just a couple of weeks, dishonorably discharged for fighting with the corporal during drill practice. I'm 17. The head of PE, coach of the school rugby team, has called me into his office, a small, windowless, slightly musky-smelling room that adjoins the sports hall. He greets me with a grin. Dave, take a seat. There's a preemptive pause. He uses these to great effect. It signals to me that this will be a conversation of significance. He says, I've been thinking about who to make captain next year. Another pause. I elect Philip. I think either Russ or Nick would do a really great job. He smiles. I think they would too. But I've decided to make you captain. I think you have exactly what the team needs to really gel this season. I'm 20. Black Mountains, Wales. A training week for outdoor pursuits instructors. And today we're being taught to abseil. Calmly and patiently, Craig teaches us the necessary rope and hardware arrangements that will keep us safely held on the mountainside. Or, on this occasion, the abseil tower. He attaches one end of the rope to my harness, then he threads it through a carabiner that's attached to his own harness. He ties the other end to the tower. I appreciate his description of the process that I should follow to be safe. But more than this, I'm grateful to be able to feel that I'm safe. When I lean back, the rope holds my body in space. I can feel that I will not fall. 21. Teaching practice at a special educational needs school. I've elected to spend my last week with Ben, a 10-year-old described as having profound and multiple needs. Ben doesn't talk. I'm not sure if he hears or understands. He spends much of his time in a wheelchair with his head strapped to the headrest. When he is out of the chair, he wears protective headgear. Every day contains moments of tears, anger, and struggle. Every day also contains moments of laughter and huge beaming smiles. Today, my last day with Ben, I've brought my guitar to school. So that afternoon, I help him into the ball pool. Soft sides filled with 1 million multicolored balls. The ball pool offers a safe space, a place of freedom. And is supported by the balls, unrestrained, free to move as he would like. As I sit poolside, picking my guitar, he swims amongst the balls. At some point, I start to sing. After a time, he comes to rest. He seems calm, still, sense peace. This moment feels like a gift. I'm 30 and beginning to learn to surf. Helpful lesson number 1 comes from Nick, the University Surf Club captain, on my first surf trip. Quietly, as I'm getting changed, he says, "You need to turn your wetsuit round. The zip should be on the back." This lesson saved me a lot of embarrassment and discomfort. Helpful lesson 2, a more technical one, comes from Dennis a couple of months later. You want to lie far enough forward on your board that you can sink the nose by pressing your chest down, but far enough back that you can pull the nose out as you paddle. This lesson saved me 1,001 wipeouts. All the other helpful lessons have come from the waves themselves. And 45, my first weeks of yoga. Hatha classes with Janet, who every week gets us doing yoga immediately. No preamble, no stand at the front and talk, no PowerPoint slides. We're guided into a meditation, and then we're into movement. Throughout, Janet verbally guides us through each movement with clarity and economy. We learn through doing. She is, I think, an excellent teacher. But Janet frequently reminds us, the best teacher in the room is your own body. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Yeah, wonderful images of connection, of relationality, both with other humans and the natural world, and the feelings of safety and being held that those bring about. Yeah, thank you. And finally, we have from a chapter research group, Democratizing Pedagogy through Autoethnography.
Morning, everyone. So as Jamie said, Joshua and Chloe were hoping to be with me today, but the chapter is actually by Joshua, Chloe, James Brading, Katie Bramley, and Henry Dobson, who were undergraduate students and master's students just closely after COVID. And I decided with them, through conversations with David, to try and do research with them, and I was their supervisor, in ways that I thought were the best ways to do it, rather than the ways that the academy tells us we should. And so this is a chapter we wrote together in several scenes, and their voices are in it. They've written their bits, and I've written bits in between them to try and glue it together. But so I'm just going to give you a flavor of some of those scenes that come up. And the first part of the chapter really reflects on David and I and our work together, and how the lessons that we've learned through teaching larger groups, where often
you ask a question, there's 200 people or 100 students and nobody will answer. It's always very silent. Everyone seems frightened to say anything in front of them. So Act 1 is reflective pedagogies. And I'm just going to read the first paragraph of the first story, which is called Cacophony. And when I talk about them, it's David and I in this bit. Before them, a large ramp lecture theatre full of bodies. But no windows, no natural light, and not much air. They always thought that strange, ironic even. How can you teach health and well-being in a room devoid of light and air? So I'm moving on to later on in the chapter when the students, Act 3, pedagogical encounters. And I've invited the students to be part of a research group on Fridays. I said you can still have individual supervision, but this is a time that we can come together and maybe do something different. What's your agenda here? Not my agenda. So, Joshua, this is what he writes. Wrapped up in blankets in my cold house with autumn settling in early, I stared at my laptop as faces began popping up on the Zoom screen. It's a bit anxiety-inducing, to be honest. All these people that I didn't know. The woman with the long hair started. Good morning, I'm Kitrina. Thanks for coming to research group. You're welcome to carry on with individual supervision if you prefer, or as well as. This group meeting is here each Friday, and we're going to focus on research and use the time to support each other's research. So, she said, what are you all interested in studying? Shall I go? I asked, surprised at why I offered to go first. Sure, she said. Well, here we go, I thought. I would like to look at the cost of living crisis and physical activity amongst students. Great, she said. And then, why? Why is that important? Oh, I was taken aback. Did I hear right? Has she just asked why? Why is that important? Is that something people would be interested about? I needed a few moments to think and then sighed. Whether to be honest or candid. I didn't have a fancy rationale. I didn't know what the literature said. But one thing I was sure of is how I felt being a student in the UK. And so it began. I grew up 2,500 miles away in Italy. That was the easy bit. And then here it's been a difficult 4 years where I haven't really related to anyone. Life here is very different to Italy. The culture, the food, the people, not to mention the weather. I laughed, pulling the blankets closer. Everything has been difficult and different. And the difference is the biggest thing. But who cares about my story? So I'm going to move on to the next chapter where I've asked the students to begin talking and writing about their own experiences. And so this is research group, maybe 6 months later. Hello, everyone. How's your week been? I looked at the screen. Chloe was obviously at home, sat amongst a pile of builder's rubbish, working on her house. James was partly lounging on his bed in student accommodation. Joshua looked like he was in the library, and Katie looked like she was at home. Last week, I asked if each of you would write a story about your experience of the topic you're interested in researching and how you relate to it. This is one way we can be transparent about your history, our biography, and how that relates to your research. But it can also be an ethical move to be on the page with your participants, as opposed to being distant, neutral, and outsider. I found it brings me a feeling of what it might be like for our participants to talk about important issues during an interview. So I just wondered if anyone fancied sharing. I will, said Katie. My research is exploring the socio-cultural factors that influence body image and mental well-being among university students. And I decided the place to begin my dissertation was with my story called Through the Eyes of Bulimia. She took a breath and started reading. Maybe it's time to speak, finally forcing my internal dialogue out instead of forcing out unwanted vomit. I dismantle my mind's fixation over my dispiriting ideas that skinny means beauty and that happiness is only achieved through reaching body ideas. Tormented by the voices within me that I don't meet the criteria for an eating disorder, that I'm not sick enough to get help. You aren't an unhealthy weight. You don't need help. You just want to put weight on. Being sick isn't starving yourself, so you're not sick. Suddenly, I'm already forcing myself away from reaching out for help, letting the voice inside my head win again after years. It always wins. Will I ever win this battle? The isolation is crippling. Kitrina, I hadn't expected that. How did she do that, I wondered. That was a really powerful story, Katie. I paused. The visceral imagery, I can really feel it in my body. The choice of words, the unwanted vomit. Henry stepped in. My flatmate had said his girlfriend did that. They would go out to eat and she'd be looking at the calories in every dish on the menu. He helped her through it though, to get better. Image of her body, and she came out the other end. She's not like that anymore. I sit back and the group took over. The conversations deepened, turned on to how we hide things and the reasons behind our actions, sharing insights, reflections, supporting. I was slightly in awe of what was happening in front of me. 4 months later. I'm just going to share one of the poems that Joshua wrote in that last minute. And it's called Falling. I delved at home, it was common. Here it was different. Dial digits, 4 clicks, and you're up in a cloud. I used, I abused, I escaped. What could I do? I didn't know. They all thought this was fun. I thought it was fun. What did I know? I was only falling deeper, deeper. Problems, paranoid, just one more. But these students took me places I hadn't expected I could possibly in a million years go. And it was the environment that we created. And it was partly arts-based research, but it was partly valuing their stories and giving them the tools to write those stories that helped us all. And the responses, if you get to read them, are amazing. Their reflections on that research group and their time together. Thank you.
Great, thank you all for lovely presentations of the work that's been done in this volume. I have a question, but I'm going to save it till slightly later because I don't want to shift away from the content of the different chapters and what we've shared. I think my question is going to be about the sort of process of bringing the book together, but perhaps we can stick with the content first of all. Which I'm going to open up for, yes, either comments or questions from people in the room or people online. Yes, why not?
School first.
Yeah. No. So just whilst people raise their hands, either online, virtually, or in the room, it's just lovely to be. I was just thinking and sitting there, what a lovely session this is to be in a sense, like, though you don't know quite what you're going to be connected with in autoethnography, when somebody shares a story and it can be about something traumatic. In this room, I feel like I'm connected to atmospheres and spaces of care and nurture, and through the work that you're all doing. And so that's there's a lovely space to be in this morning. So thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. Any comments or questions, Sally?
Comment. Thank you. That really, obviously now I want to get the book. You've sold it. Well done. Well done. Well done. And for the library, I can see the two of us sitting here. I guess for me, there was something that really was heartening for me to hear was the dissolving. And I'm saying dissolving, but for you guys, I guess that it wasn't having to dissolve too much, but the hierarchy, between us and our students, and learning from our students. And learning from the students, yeah, that was just so lovely to hear. And wouldn't we want other tutors, lecturers, teachers, and the difference with the booming, bounding, stabbing French teacher?
What do you want to make a response about hierarchy and
To say that I'm amazed in what Joshua wrote in the book, how he described me telling a story flipped the hierarchy. And I hadn't been aware of just how he says it's ingrained in students. One of the other chapters authors in that book says we're told to protect ourselves, not to tell our supervisors anything. Now, they were talking about marijuana smoking. So, and I was worried that I didn't even know whether it was a drug and whether I'm supposed to port people. So there's this whole taboo issues. So if they're not going to talk to us, then how do we talk about student welfare or anything? You know, it begins at a point of trust, but we're not getting it. So there are ways to do that. Do you want to?
Yeah. I think it's fascinating to me, first, how when you create a nurturing environment, how people open up. Like I mentioned a little bit, like the kind of stories that I heard. Some of these students were working with me for years. I had no idea what they were. Like one student had like a alcoholic father she was taking care of. It was really hard on her, like abusive relationship. So I was just like, I felt, I still feel honored, like to be there and these people trusting me. And the other thing that you mentioned is, I felt like I needed to, I'm part of this group, I need to share. So I shared a lot. For example, I shared like one of the most sensitive parts of my life, that's the loss of my brother, which at some point I want to write about it, but I shared with them. One time I was coming from the ICQI meeting, always like energized and all that, and then I sang. I didn't plan, like I wrote a little piece, and I usually start the class with me, and then it was part of like, it was when I arrived at the meeting and Marcelo was playing the guitar, who's a Brazilian, you know, and plays very well. And then I started singing the song, and I sang the entire song in front of the class, and everybody was like, start clapping. I mean, you know, just the entire thing, like for me, I mean, I didn't plan, but it's just like the kind of bond that I created with these people. It's a bond that, you know, will be forever. Like it's just like you kind of, you kind of forget that it's a student and professor relationship, right? It becomes much more than that. I think it's unbelievable for me.
Great. So I think this feeds into a question. Just going to grab this because so no, it's not my question. It's not actually my question. Yeah. So this. Oh, Elise has her hand up. Okay, we'll come to you in Elise in a minute. But just as a few comments on here. So Christopher's wanting the title of the book, which is Autoethnography Pedagogy and Practice. Stories of interdisciplinary innovation. And if you look in the program, it's also all of the information about the book is there. And then Victor, I think VW is Victoria Wright, probably. Yes, good. So I can't come on mic as the mic isn't working for me, but I'd be interested to know, and this relates to the aspect of sharing, which Djenane was just talking about. Do we, and if we do, to what extent carefully do we share our stories with our supervisees and mentees? And so I'd just be interested to hear some others of you talk about the degree to which you share your own stories.
Yeah, because I think I, for several reasons, waited to share my stories, because this was when I was exploring, reading, learning about autoethnography, which I still am, but quite a few years back. And I thought to myself, I'm brought up as not a sharer. So I kind of waited and tried to like I said, number of his stories because I found them beautiful. But then we met afterwards. We drank beer. We're now friends, I would say. And then we started I started sharing, and I think the pieces kind of fell in place for him as well. Because, like I wrote and said, it resonated with me, but I didn't reveal why. But that's been really nice, and I've had conversations with Geir, which are quite deep, at least compared to other conversations I have. Which has been really nice. It's an ongoing thing. But that can't happen with everybody, of course. But, yeah.
Thank you, Knut. I think it's a good question, Victoria. It's really a difficult one to handle, especially within the way that the neoliberal university world now, where if you share a vulnerability, you feel like you can be pushed out. I've certainly felt that at times when it's mental health conditions, for example. So I'm careful about what I share too, partly because it's what I feel that student or those students might be okay with, but it's also what I'm okay with in terms of, it's hard to talk about, you know, a lot of the areas that we research. So for me, the form of the telling is really important. So there's arenas that I can share my experience that feels more truthful, perhaps more safer, perhaps more dignified. So often that's through film, that I can get the film to a point that I'm happy enough with it. It can include music, it can include images. I can be very careful what I say and then present it. So I have a module, an undergraduate module, final year, mental health and physical activity. And I think it was the first time last year I shared a film I made a few years ago called 7 Days in Lockdown, which is an exploration really of my own well-being and lack of it during that time. And I felt that that was good to share, to allow anyone in the room, and there are quite a few students, undergraduate level, that are dealing with their own difficulties as well. So I'm not sure, I haven't had a lot in the way of response. It's 80 odd students. I share it as asynchronous material. They look at if they want. But I have experienced more kindness from some of them than I would have expected. So I don't know that there's a direct correlation, but I wonder if that's a bit the case, what's been happening. Yes.
The question was, do you feel vulnerable for doing something that's so intimate and personal? And David said yes. Just going back to sharing with our students about it, I think it really depends. We have to be judicious in what we do and when we do it. And my circumstances are different to all of yours. So my autoethnographies have been published since 2009, and I'm in sport, which has a particular dominant narrative, and I'm on a mission to stand up against it and say, that isn't what it's like. And so my stories, I want them to be out, I want them to be shared, they are part of the curriculum, and I don't feel vulnerable sharing them. I feel more vulnerable when I don't share them. So we need to think about, exactly like you said, there isn't a one size fits all. We have to think about this group of students this time and what the subject is that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, just a short comment from me. Both Knut and I, we teach in mental health, and we also have a background as mental health clinicians. And most of our students, they work in mental health. So I think it's this, many of our students that they like to kind of work with this balance with what to share and what not to share. What are you okay with sharing? Because it also applies to their clinical work. Yeah. I mean, it's good to share sometimes, but you maybe not overshare for several reasons, because you will be vulnerable, and also because you can overwhelm your patients in a way. So there's this balance. So I think it's this dialogue and being attentive to the other and what's okay, and being attentive to yourself as well. Yeah.
Can I just say something that's I think is very important that happened? Sorry, because because this, I think it's important that's happening to, to my group right now. I'm first, like, I'm very concerned about not what I share, because I mean, I'm old enough, I've been there forever, like I don't care too much. And they are not going to get rid of me at this point, I think, the university. But I'm very concerned about what they share. So in my first few classes, we talk about that. Like, I just want to make sure that they know what they're doing. And, like, I'm not a psychologist, even though I have a psychologist in my group that she's a postdoc. I mean, she did a master. So I've been having this person with me. She helps me a lot because she's a clinician. So she gives me support. I still have her around, but I'm very concerned about what they share. But one thing that I want to say, one of my colleagues, who is a professor, who advised some people in autoethnography with me, she is stepping down, like she's kind of, I don't know the word, like afraid. She's concerned about advising autoethnography because we have like this many students that want to do this, and she feels overwhelmed emotionally by their stories and to follow them. So I feel like she doesn't want to do this anymore. Like, I'm having a hard time to, I'm like, let's keep doing this. Like, there's a lot of, we need to do this. And she doesn't feel secure enough psychologically. Like, yeah. So it's something that's happening right now that I don't know how to deal with that, but that's something to think about as an advisor to how much you can handle, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that opens up a whole other sort of area of conversation that we could have. So thank you, Victoria. That was an excellent question. And thank you, everybody. Elise, please come in.
Good morning, everybody. What a great session to start the day off at 1 a.m. Woke up better than another cup of coffee. Beautiful, beautiful session. And I want to keep going with this topic about reciprocal sharing and kind of add in a performative perspective to that I think the ways in which sharing happens or can happen and the risks can be different depending upon our cultural context, our disciplinary context, right? There is no one size fits all. But a couple of things I would want to say to that, and one is that trust is always reciprocal. We know that about human relationships. So some measure before we ask students to unfold themselves in public spaces, I think there is an obligation to demonstrate that courage ourselves. Secondly, often our revelations are serving work in the world. They're doing political work, right? And so, Kitrina, you're really clear about there are reasons I'm putting these stories in the world, right? I think of all of Tony Adams' work, right? With so why are we putting? It's not just to open the heart, it's doing work. And so all those things I think are attending it. And to remember that we are also models for our students, not just how do you do this work, but how do you stay resilient? How does the work itself, and I want to link to what David is talking about, how does art making perhaps give you a methodology of walking into difficult experiences and walking back out and going about your life in a healthy way? And if we can model that, that's part of the pedagogy, it would seem to me. One last variation, and that is since my discipline is performance, I was always asking students to do these physical things in public in front of other people, right? And we know performance can make all of that emotional stuff. It would be irresponsible if I did not also teach them, how do you walk yourself back out of that flashback moment, that experiential moment, right? And then walk back out into the world with thousands of students who are strangers in that raw thing, right? So last link, that's Tammy Spry. That's her idea about practiced vulnerability. That part of our pedagogy is teaching students to do that, as I know all of you do, because your stories about your work with students demonstrate that you're doing that. So enough. Thanks so much. What a wonderful morning panel.
Thank you, Elise. Yeah, thank you. And I notice, Chris, your hand's gone up whilst Elise has been speaking. So I'm just wondering if you're going to continue on the same thread or want to respond to that.
Yes. Well, I always hate when I have to follow Elise or Bryant because they're always so brilliant and it like takes forever for me to come up with something like that to say. They do it on the fly like that. But I'll just add to that point that when I've embraced my vulnerability openly with my students and the reciprocity that Elise was talking about, they're always at first surprised, but then they quickly sort of catch on that it's okay in the space that we've created. And a lot of that has to do with what you were all talking about creating that kind of space that welcomes that openness. And so I just really wanted to applaud you all. This is a wonderful session it's now 5:12 a.m. here.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, so I don't know if any... Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Elise, and thank you, Chris. Okay, so we have about, 7 or 8 minutes left. This is like, there's a lot of space in this section. It's great, yeah. So anybody else want to say something?
What am I doing? I'm inviting responses to something. Yeah, I share some very vulnerable things about myself on our course, and our course is a psychotherapy course. So basically around suicide attempts. I don't like attempts. Suicide that didn't work. And although I've done it over a number of years, depending on my state of mind at the time I share. So although it's kind of rehearsed material and it's performative in a way as well, because I share some film, not of me. There are. I know there have been times when I'm almost shaking inside, and it's what it takes out of me to share, and then other times I feel really grounded and yet it's on the timetable and it falls when it falls, and I haven't got I just wondered if with rehearsed material, stories you've told, the times that you tell them.
I can't, there's a blurring between everything I do, between me and the other. And so I can't. So one of the stories that I tell is about a colleague of mine who played the tour and was raped. And I didn't know, she couldn't actually talk about that. She spent 5 hours with me and probably said 200 words. And I wrote a long story that I hate reading. It's horrible, but it's a really powerful story for men in the sports science department. And I'm, Elise, you talk about the performance. I can't help my body. I'm an Italian because I speak with my body when I read that story. And there's a cost to doing it, but I want to do it because the men in the room say, I never saw it from that perspective before. Now, when I see the story in the headlines of an athlete's raped a woman, I think, oh, well, maybe, I've always thought he didn't do it. Maybe he did. So it's changed perception. So there's a reason for doing it in that context, in that time, and me doing it. And I think it has to be me that reads that story. And I never know how I'm going to respond and how I feel. So there isn't a one size fits all for me either. But we do the work that we're able to do at the time that we can do it, and don't criticize others who don't do the work because they're not in the right place. Knut.
My experience is you never know what you're sharing, anything evokes in people. That's a strange thing to me. I don't share much, but I think I've shared enough, especially in Norwegian, because that's my language of tongue. So, but sometimes it starts a fruitful discussion. Other times it provokes, and you get strange responses, and it's different every time. But yeah, and I often experience myself tearing up when I read stuff which I thought was clarified, which is difficult to me. Yeah.
And the question in a sense was more about kind of not having necessarily the flexibility to kind of go into a space and try to read that space as to what you should share, but already scheduled times when you're going to be reading something, or is that right? Yeah. Okay, interesting. Yeah.
Pascal, you read one of your wonderful stories and showed the film that you made. And when you talk about filmmaking, it gives us a bit of space so we can make the film and show it. So we're not actually embodying it in that moment. I think that's helpful to your own mental health. But I've heard that story, I've seen that film. It's an early attempt. It's very rough, raw. It's Pascal talking about her mother's death or missingness. So you presume that she's not here anymore, but there's a slight doubt because there's no body. And I've seen the film, I've watched it millions of times, and I've been supervising Pascal. And this year at Dartington, when you played it, it really affected me, and I wasn't expecting it. So we don't know, even ourselves, when something is going to suddenly, it's like, wow, that really, it struck me a different place today.
Yeah, I mean, I can't look at this. I can't look at the last picture because it's the picture of my mom. So it's then brings everything up. But yeah, it really depends on how you feel. And I surprised myself to have cried yesterday when I was, oh, not cried, but felt the emotion coming, whereas I read it in the train. I read it at home and it was fine. I could read it and there was a distance. It's sometimes you catch yourself being, yeah, and maybe it's just you were not grounded at that moment, or yeah.
You guys as well. If people are lovely and nice and supportive, might that mean that you are actually in that moment likely to be more emotional than if you have a hostile audience and you're holding yourself together like being on a train? Is there anything of that with you?
Yeah, I think like what Knut just said, I mean, for instance, reading something personal out here, even if the story that you know it, you read it many times, it's still kind of the story being witnessed by somebody kind and caring. And it gets to me, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. I am very much in my infancy of supervising students on a master's who are doing their autoethnographies, and I was really encouraging them to write stories. And then when it came to sharing our stories, they were all kind of feeling like, oh, what are we doing? Why are we sharing these stories? And they're like, they're quite boring. It's just my life. And I sort of said to them all, I said, no, that's the joy. I said, but I just want to warn you, and I know from my experience of being in therapy, and when I did my autoethnography, there was something so powerful about saying something out loud rather than reading it or having that internal process. And I think that's kind of the twin of the power of autoethnography and the power of therapy. And when the students actually spoke the stories out loud, every single one of them was in tears. And I think it's because how rarely do we voice our internal process. And I think there's something so powerful about, holding that to yourself or putting it out to the world. And no matter who listens and who's receiving it, really, my iPhone notes page is just full of like thoughts and stuff. And as soon as I say it out loud, sometimes, boof, done. So yeah, I think there's something really powerful about the saying out loud.
So we are pretty much out of time, although I know that Pascal has one. Was it more of a comment that you had, or was it a question? What am I doing? Oh, right. Okay. Okay. Sorry.
Just a quick question then, which is not going to come because I'm in Russia. I did that training with students who, to my surprise, had the same experience as I, and felt empowered actually to tell their story, which was really touching. But what do you do when you are running out of time and there's maybe not that time to connect with them one-to-one? I felt at one stage everyone wanted to go back home, session finished, and I wanted to stay behind. I wanted some people to stay behind because I wanted to talk to them. I wanted to hold them in all safe in their space, but it was time to go. What do you do then?
A rather apt question because we have run out of time. And maybe this relates also to what oh yes, what Elisa was saying about the process of taking people in and taking people out. I've got a feeling there's probably not a simple answer to that question. So I'm going to leave you to discuss that afterwards. And my apologies, we haven't had time for you. So, okay, maybe we could share afterwards. So thank you to our presenters and to those who've contributed to this book, as well as those who couldn't be here today. This is good. I'm definitely going to get my copy as well. Great. Thank you, those online.